Okay, so we're into part three. Sorry, this is me talking a lot, but this should be the end of it. Okay, so last part we started talking about the diagnostic model, this thing that your politics, a good politics should give you, is a way of thinking about the world that helps you identify who your friends or enemies are. That's number one. And it does that by having high specificity and sensitivity. The other thing that your diagnostic model needs to be is like replicable or like immutable. I don't know what the right way to describe it is, but basically, if I take your tumor scanner and I give it to each doctor, there shouldn't be different interpretations between different doctors. It should be as clear as possible, and the doctor's perspective, the radiologist's perspective, shouldn't be dramatically different based on that person's experience. So a good diagnostic tool is clear. So going back to kind of like this identity politics thing, if you want everybody in your movement to agree on who the friends are and who the enemies are, which is really important for a populist massed politics, the diagnostic tool that you give them can't create different sets of friends and enemies based on who they happen to be. Or a bad diagnostic model creates a fractured interpretation of the world across populations. So going back to kind of like an identitarian lens, it's easy to understand that if you give somebody a racialized method of understanding the world, hierarchies and oppressions, and you give it to somebody who's black, who lives in a primarily black neighborhood, versus somebody who's white, who lives in a primarily white city and state, whatever it might be, that who they conclude are their friends and enemies is going to be different. Okay? Maybe that's acceptable to you as an individual, that like you have fractured diagnoses, but it's not acceptable to an effective politics. You can't make progress with something like that. Okay? You might be committed to it for some strange fucking reason, but it doesn't matter unless you can make the case that somehow it can build power. And in our case, power means a populist consensus, then it's not doing its job. So yeah, like this immutable nature of what the diagnosis is very, very important. The other thing that your diagnostic tool needs to do, and it's sort of, it has a little bit of immutability in it, is that it should generate, like what tumbles out of that diagnosis is a common sense response. So a common sense prescription. So something that scans the body and tells you exactly where each tumor is and tells you which ones are tumors and which ones aren't tumors, recommends a surgical response of going in, cutting open, scooping out the tumor, stitching it back up. If, on the other hand, you don't have something that creates, like provides you with actionable information. Let's say my diagnostic tool is all I can do is take a blood test and tell you whether you have tumors or not where they are, not how to treat them, like nothing, it just tells you that you're sick. Then like the only prescription that you can get out of that is prayer. Hope and pray that the tumors go away. And this is in general the state of the left, in the sense that their diagnostic model produces prescriptions that aren't actionable. So all they have is an assumption that good intentions and a good moral posture will somehow manifest in results. And so that is is a bad politics. And like the prescriptions need to be common sense because, again, we're trying to do a populist politics, and you want everybody somewhat independently to come to the same conclusions as to what would be a useful response. Because we don't have power in society, we don't have centralized control, you need an ideological model that gets you to common action without a lot of effort. And then the other thing that these actions need to have is the ability to measure how successful they are towards progress. If you can't figure out if things are going in the right direction or not, so like in the case of a simple power equation, you can say, okay, did my group of people, the people that are working together, did they get more power or less? Okay, that's a measurable thing. You can say, do they have more money collectively? But there are things that aren't measurable, not objectively and meaningfully. So, do people have? Is there a lot of bias in society? That's just soft, and there's no like solid correlation between biases and attitudes and actual like material condition. We don't know whether when that correlation exists, whether it's causal or it's coincidental. It's just a correlation as opposed to a causation. So like it's hard to measure, and it's hard to figure out whether it's actually moving you towards your goal. So what you want is so you want your diagnostic tool to generate actionable prescriptions that are common sense, that everybody sort of comes up with on their own, and that provide you a way of making sure that you're making progress towards your goal. And like those are the big two. It's like a goal and like a diagnostic model that produces prescriptions. There's like one last factor that's specific to our politics, populist mass politics, which is the ability of your politics to have wide adoption. Everybody on board. Because we need it. There's no way to do this shit without that. And like at a different time, I would like talk to you about stuff like transmissibility and explain it to you. But I don't need to do that right now because everybody's an expert on viral spread because we live in the time of Corona. And honestly, a socialist politics needs to be like coronavirus-like. This is what it needs to be. If you think about Corona, it's not the deadliest of diseases. But it can wreak global havoc. It can bring the entire world to its knees because of transmissibility. It has such high transmissibility that you can't contain it. And socialist politics needs those same characteristics. The individual power of people in the project is very low. So we're not lethal. The only way to overcome it is to infect as many people as possible with our politics so that they can act in concert to overcome this global behemoth called capitalism. So we need something to be highly transmissible. Okay, and that means like a politics that's simple to understand, that doesn't have a lot of contradictions, that resonates with people. If you have like something that has like a bunch of different contradictions and the only way to sort them out in your head is if you have like a master's degree from Princeton like with concepts like intersectionality and multiplying oppressions, like all that stuff, you've already lost the game. Okay, because you've lost that critical element of transmissibility. and you don't even have your audience in mind of who it is that need to absorb this and how much time and effort they have in order to adopt this ideology. The other thing that is incredibly useful about a mass politics, a mass ideology, is its stickiness. And what that means is that we are pushing an idea that's counter-hegemonic. The world is trying to tell you something about how everything works. And we're trying to tell you something different. And the only way for that to work, even though we don't have a lot of power to keep reinforcing our ideas, is to make the idea naturally sticky. And that means that things in your daily life, the way that you see the world, reinforce the truth of the political model that we give you. So a class analysis gives people like hundreds of times in their given day for a worker reminders of how they are part of the exploited class and how the capitalist class is the exploiter. That class contradiction is very, very clear and highly reinforced within our capitalist reality. And so class-based analysis, relatively simple, we're on one side, the capitalists are on another, is very, very sticky because the world helps remind you all the time of that reality. And that's basically it. Like, those are my criteria. Have a clear goal and make sure it's right. Have like a good diagnostic model that helps you tell who your friends are and who your enemies are. And that suggests good solutions, good prescriptions and actions that you can take. And make sure that your politics can spread easily amongst people who can power your movement and help you achieve your goal. And that's it. There's nothing more to say. So I'm going to wrap it up. I know this was just like a checklist, a laundry list, and a bit clinical in its nature. I think one thing that's useful is to sort of navigate some examples of different types of politics, how they fare against these criteria. I might do that some other time. I sort of kind of interspersed a few examples here and there in this talk. But that's it. Good night, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this mess of me talking. And yeah, let me know what you think. Leave me some comments. Whatevs. Later.